Hello! Today we're going to have a look at how to get scattershots to play at random times and locations in a scene. The goal is to take a base layer, add our scattershots, and have them play back naturally like this. So let's outline what we need to do. We want to create first of all a sound cue which plays a random sound from a selection of audio clips. We then want a blueprint which we can place into our scene to trigger this sound cue to play at random times in random locations. After that we can tweak as needed. So first of all I'll be using this free sample scene from the Epic Store. You can download that, import it into your project, and then we'll have something like this. First things first, I'm going to get things organized, created some audio folders here, and get our sounds imported. Alright, our ambient bed just needs to be set to loop and we can bring it into the scene. Lower the volume a little bit because I know it's kind of loud. And let's give that a shot. Alright, sounds pretty good. Now for our scattershots. First, I'll create a sound cue. Call it scatterbirds. And drag my sounds into it. Then I'll plug them all into a random node. And give it a little bit of modulation. Don't really need to do the volume since we'll be attenuating it by distance, but pitch couldn't hurt. And speaking of attenuation, we'll need to create an attenuation class to determine how the sound should lose volume as you get farther away from it. I'll create one here. Open it up, take a quick look, and we'll be tweaking these values later to getting somewhere where we want, but in general we're going to want a more closer inner radius, which means the sound starts falling off more quickly, and a somewhat more squished in max distance. So now our sound cue should play what we want to hear. All right. Now the next step is to trigger this to play in the game. We'll do this by creating a blueprint which we can drop into the scene, which instantiates sounds at locations and in time intervals which we dictate. Actor, call it player ref scatter. We'll see why in just a second. And let's take a look at the event graph. Okay. The way I like to work is I like to start with the goal in mind, or the main thing I want to happen, and then work my way backwards to figure out what we need. So the main thing we want to happen is we want to play a sound at a location. So play sound at location. We know that the sound we want to play in this case is our scatterbirds we just made. And now let's trigger its playback. So what we want to do is on every tick, so every frame update, we're going to start a delay. Once that's done delaying, we'll go ahead and play the sound at that location. Delay should range from, let's say, I don't know, in real life you would want to tweak it so that it sounds natural, but for now we'll just say 1 to 5 so that we can test it out pretty easily. All right, now let's talk about the location. So our logic's going to take a point of reference and add or subtract a random value from a range to the X, Y, and Z axes. So there's two main ways to do it. You can use either the actor that you're creating itself, or you can reference the player as the points of reference for these sounds. We're going to be moving around the scene, and the birds could be anywhere, and there's no point in spawning them somewhere where we're not, so we're going to use the player as a point of reference. Since the ocean is the ocean and hopefully stays where we left it, I'm going to create a separate class for playing sounds over there with their own corresponding spawn locations. So I'll start with our birds. To do that, we're going to need our getActorLocation function. And the target, so the thing we actually want the location of, is our player pawn. So we're going to do getPlayerPawn. And then we have our player's location. Okay. But we don't want to play it at our player's location. We want to add something to it. So what do we want to add? Basically, since the values might be different of what we want to add for X, Y, and Z, we're going to need to assemble those individually. And you do that with a make vector. Okay. Here we go. And we're going to want to assign a random float for X, Y, and Z. X and Y can be the same, right? So it's just the area around you. The height maybe should be a little bit different. So we'll do that one separate. The birds are hopefully not in your face. So we'll say they're a little bit above you to a lot above you. And we will say about 1,500 units away in each direction. We want to make sure that this corresponds to the attenuation distance that we set. Let me just double check that. Okay, so we actually had 2,000 fall off in each direction. So we'll say, yeah, but that's a bit far. So we'll just do it like this. Okay. All right. Now that our random location is ready, let's check it out. Compile, save. Back in here. Drag it into the scene. And here we go. Can you hear that 3D positioning? Okay, already not bad, but let's make it a little more realistic and add some waves crashing here along the coast. So to do that, I'm going to use the player reference blueprint we made as a point of reference to start out. This one, object reference scatter. Open it up. And we don't want to play scatter birds, but scatter waves. Oh, we didn't make scatter waves yet. All right, so same as the birds, we're going to need a sound cue for the waves. So I'm going to create scatter waves here. By the way, if you know a quicker way to match the number of outputs and inputs, right? So just dragging these in here would be cool, but I don't know how to do that. So let me know if you do. All right. With that, got our wave crashings here. Now in our copied blueprint, we're gonna use scatter waves as our sound we want to play. Okay, now a couple important differences here. Since we're going to be using the actor itself as a point of reference, like I said earlier, we don't want to be, playing sounds far away where they're not even being heard. So what I'm going to do is we're going to start with a check to see if our player is close to this actor, right? So close enough that it can even hear it. And if so, then we're going to play a sound along the coast, but we'll need to update the possible ranges to be added to the vector here, so that they relate to their location in the scene. So I'm going to spawn a few of these along the coast, about 6,000 units apart, and I'll use that as my point of reference for the logic we're going to set up here. So first we want to do that distance check. So before we decide to play our sound, we're going to throw in a branch here. Check that this condition is true before executing. And the condition that we want to check is the distance. So get distance to, right? So we want the distance between self. So this actor I'm going to place on the beach and our player. So get player. Okay, so now we've got our distance. And then all we need to do is we need to say, if this distance is less than whatever max distance we decide, then that's true, and we can go ahead and execute the rest of this. So we'll just say 6,000 here, or so. And by the way, you can just highlight nodes and press C, create little commented sections here. Okay, and since we're using the actor and not the player, we don't need to do that. We can just use self and then add a random variable to that. Place some of these. Now with our whole coast covered, we're going to want to check which way the water goes outwards. So if this, see the Y value goes up as we go farther out, so we'll want to increase our value. Do that here. We don't need to be changing our Z axis, so we can just use this one for Y. We'll say anywhere between 0 and about 100 units into the water. We should be able to hear that. Again, since they're about 6,000 apart, along the x-axis, we can do that. And there you have it. That should do it. Let's test it out. Compile, save. And again, just to run through it one more time, once we're within a certain distance, we should be able to run this delay, which plays our sound, which is the random location based on the actor itself, which is along the coast. As you can hear, we've got our waves. Our birds are a little close. We can tweak all that later. I think we're starting to sound pretty good. Alright, so these are just two approaches, but they should serve as a good starting point to get you up and running and spawning random sounds in your scenes. Leave a comment if you want to share a way you like to do this, or if you have any other game audio topics you'd like to see covered in the future. Otherwise, have fun. See you in the next one.